Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. Now, whether you're building a budget gaming PC with an i5-12400 or a 4K ultra gaming PC with an i5-14600K, getting the best Intel motherboard, it can be very confusing. So today, we're going to cover everything that you need to know to get the best motherboard for 14th gen Intel CPUs as well as 12th and 13th gen Intel CPUs. And we'll give specific product recommendations for every budget level. Remember, if you get value out of this video, give it a like as it makes a huge difference to the channel, and of course subscribe, click that bell icon, that way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. Before that, this video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows 10 licenses and that terrible Activate Windows 10 watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key, and get a Windows 10 Home or Pro OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! You have a fully licensed Windows 10 for a crazy low price, which can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. Use the links in the video description below. Let's talk about motherboard chipsets because, oh my goodness, can they be confusing? From B660 to B760 to Z690 to Z790 to H610 and beyond. Now, the first thing to focus on is the very first number that comes after the letter. So for instance, focus on the 6 in Z690, as that tells you the generation of the motherboard, often called the series. Chipsets in the 600 and 700 series, so the B660 and B760 motherboards for instance, are all on the LGA 1700 socket, which supports Intel 14th, 13th, and 12th gen CPUs. The 600 series chipset motherboards were released for the 12th gen Intel launch, and the 700 series motherboards were released for the 13th gen Intel launch. Note that no new chipset is launching for 14th gen, but several of the motherboard manufacturers are releasing newer Z790 versions like the Z790 ASUS Pro X AX sent over to us by Gigabyte. So a big thank you there. Now let's talk about the letter in the chipset name. The Z series motherboards, so Z690 and Z790, are all designed to allow overclocking on the K series unlocked CPUs. And they also have about double the PCIe lanes, which means generally they have a lot more USB and other rear panel connections. They also generally cost at least a little bit more. I typically recommend using a Z series motherboard for 13th and 14th gen unlocked CPUs like the i5-14600K to get the most out of them. Note that in addition, many Z790 motherboards have better DDR5 memory traces, which help compatibility and stability when using ultra-fast DDR5 RAM, particularly with higher-end gaming builds. More about DDR4 and DDR5 on Intel motherboards coming up. Then we have the B series motherboards, B660 and B760, which are great for the locked Intel CPUs and even the older unlocked 12th gen CPUs, particularly the i5-12600K. The main difference is that the B series motherboards, they can't overclock K series unlocked CPUs like the i5-14600K, but they will work in the boards. Note that the B series motherboards have a power limit based on the CPU, though many, but not seemingly all of them, will allow you to raise that power limit to get the maximum level of performance. We cover how to do this in our After You Build PC Setup Guide. B-series motherboards, they do allow for full RAM overclocking, including the use of XMP auto overclocking profiles. In terms of PCIe lanes, they have about half as many as the Z-series boards. And the most important part is they generally cost a bit less, though there are some cheap Z690 boards. Finally, we have the H chipsets, which are a little confusing. H610 motherboards, they are ultra budget boards that don't cost much less than the B660, and they include a number of constraints, like locking DDR4 memory speed to a maximum of 3200, and we just don't recommend them. For some reason, they still make a handful of H660 and H760 boards, and they're essentially the same as a B660 or B760, so if you do find one on a good sale, just pretend it's a B-series motherboard. DDR4 versus DDR5 on Intel 14th, 13th, and 12th generation CPUs, it's decided when you buy the motherboard. Many Intel LGA 1700 motherboards have two versions, a DDR4 RAM version and a DDR5 RAM version. That's because DDR4 and DDR5, they're different technologies and they're even different physical sockets. We go into more detail on this in our Best RAM for Gaming 2023 video, so check that out for more. The most important thing for you to understand is that your RAM choice is locked in when you buy the motherboard, so make sure the motherboard choice aligns with your RAM choice. Motherboard BIOS and BIOS flashback are really important for Intel motherboard selection. The BIOS is the operating system for the motherboard, and older boards that came out before 13th or 14th gen Intel launched may not have an updated BIOS, and they won't boot out of the box. Luckily, many boards have BIOS flashback on them. Gigabyte calls this QFlash Plus, where you can flash the BIOS without a compatible CPU to the latest version that you download from the motherboard manufacturer's website. We cover this step by step in our How to Build a PC 2023 video, so I'll leave it linked down in the video description. Now, unfortunately, a number of motherboards lack this feature, particularly ASUS 600 series boards. So it's safe to get any 600 or 700 series board with a 12th gen CPU. For 13th gen, you'll either need a 700 series board or a 600 series board that has BIOS flashback. And for 14th gen, you'll either need one of these new 700 series boards specifically launched for 14th gen, like the Z790 ASUS Pro X, or a 600 or 700 series motherboard with BIOS flashback. Motherboard size. There are 4 mainstream motherboard sizes, what we call form factors. The full-size ATX form factor like these, a 2/3 size motherboard called a micro ATX or MATX for short, and a miniature size motherboard with only one PCIe slot called an ITX motherboard intended for small form factor build. Note there's also an extended ATX or eATX size motherboards that's slightly larger than these, will fit into most ATX size cases, but of course check your specs and compatibility. Now, most of you will likely want either a full-size ATX or micro ATX motherboard, but we'll also go through some ITX motherboards in our recommendations. Note that ITX boards, they tend to be much more expensive. Also, the PC case that you buy, it needs to fit the motherboard. And while small motherboards will fit into larger cases, ATX motherboards obviously will not fit into cases designed exclusively for smaller boards, so check size and compatibility before you buy a case. So what motherboard features should you be looking for? Let's lead off with the motherboard VRMs, which is the little half square that delivers power to your CPU. While most boards advertise that they're compatible with any Intel CPU, up to an i9, the reality is the cheap, cut-down motherboards, they often lack the proper VRMs for higher core count CPUs. Now, what ends up happening is that the VRM can overheat and throttle the CPU performance. This is one reason why I typically recommend investing in a good quality Z-series motherboard for the higher core count and higher power draw CPUs like the unlocked i5-14600K and 13600K and higher CPUs. We take this into account in all of our specific product recommendations. Let's also briefly discuss PCIe Gen 5 device motherboard compatibility because I see so many people overspending on this totally worthless feature. Now, PCIe Gen 5 internal motherboard lanes are great. They allow you to connect more Gen 3 and Gen 4 devices to your motherboard. But when it comes to SSD and GPU slots rated to run at Gen 5 speed, you should not spend extra money to get them. Gen 5 GPUs, they don't even exist yet, and PCIe Gen 4 will be fine for years to come for GPU bandwidth. For SSDs, most users barely take advantage of SATA SSD speeds, especially in gaming, let alone NVMe PCIe Gen 3 or Gen 4 speeds. It's very likely that PCIe Gen 5 GPUs and SSDs won't offer any tangible benefits during the relevant lifespan of your PC build. So my advice, don't spend any extra money chasing this feature. Let's talk about storage connections, starting with M.2 connectors. Motherboards range from one M.2 drive connector to up to 5 and even more, depending on the board itself. There are 2 primary types of M.2 connectors, one intended for storage devices and the other one intended for M.2 Wi-Fi adapters. These M.2 connectors can run at different maximum speeds from PCIe Gen 3 to Gen 4 to the newest and ludicrous Gen 5. Many motherboards now come with built-in heatsinks for M.2 drives, so consider that before you buy an SSD with a pre-installed heat shield. In addition, most motherboards come with at least 4 SATA drive connectors. Motherboard audio. Now, the audio section of the motherboard, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of the board, and it's made up by capacitors and a Realtek audio codec chip. You use this audio anytime you plug in an analog device with a connector that looks like this. If instead you're plugging in a sound device with a digital connection, like HDMI or USB, then you're bypassing the onboard motherboard audio processing, and instead you're using the secondary device for digital to analog conversion. Budget audio codecs can sound fine, and they're typically in the 800 series, such as ALC 897. More premium audio codecs have better overall signal-to-noise ratios and additional audio signal boost for front panel headphones, like the ALC 1200. The best audio codecs are the ALC 1220 or the newer, but very similar, ALC 4080, both of which offer additional encoding and decoding support, as well as support for high impedance headphones when using the front panel PC audio plugs. Let's talk about USB connectivity, starting with the rear panel. Now, these can come in a couple different speeds and connection types. Most boards, they offer a range of USB-A connections, ranging in speed from USB 2.0 for like your mice and keyboard. Those are usually the black USB connections, to the USB 3.2 Gen 1, typically colored blue, to USB 3.2 Gen 2 connections, often colored red. There are also USB Type-C connectors, which are smaller but faster. Motherboards also have headers to plug in the front PC case USB connections, both USB 3.2 and the slower 2.0 ports. And some come with a USB Type-C header. In addition to USB connections, your motherboard will come with wired Ethernet. Wi-Fi can also be built in, and if it is, it's going to include Bluetooth connectivity, though you can buy an adapter either as a USB Wi-Fi adapter or a PCIe Wi-Fi add-in card to add these features later. Let's jump into product recommendations, which are all linked down in the video description and which you can use to check out pricing and availability in your region. We're going to continue to keep this list updated, including if new motherboard models release or if a board is discontinued, which does happen from time to time. Let's jump into the best motherboard for 14th gen Intel CPUs. So this is the i5 14600K, the i7 14700K, and the i9 14900K, and obviously the KF variants. If you have a 13th gen unlocked CPU like the 13600K, these are also going to be good recommendations for them. Let's start off with the best motherboard for i5 14600K, because this is an interesting one. We want to go DDR5 because DDR5 prices have come way down. Check out our best RAM for gaming for our recommendations there. And at the same time, we don't want to overspend on the motherboard. Otherwise, we could have gotten an i7 14700K instead. So we're looking for something kind of mid-ranges, and we're probably going to spend anywhere around $180 to about $220, $230 on the motherboard if you're in the US. If you're outside the US in a tougher market, you'll probably end up spending a little bit more. We want to go probably with a Z690 motherboard. Some of the Z790 more budget tier motherboards could also be considered. I like Z690 DDR5 boards for a couple reasons. They tend to have like the upgraded audio features on them. They tend to have a lot of rear panel connectivity to them. They don't overspend on a lot of high-speed Gen 5 device kind of stuff because it wasn't really available when they came out. So they tend to be pretty good price to performance. And my favorite one in this category is the ASRock Z690 PG Velocity. I can only find this one right now in the US at Newegg. So check those links down in the video description. I'll have everything linked there, especially if I find it on Amazon or something like that. A couple things I love about this motherboard. First of all, it comes with Wi-Fi. It's $158, and it's been at this price for weeks and weeks and weeks. $158, it's got upgraded audio on it, really nice looking audio section, really nice rear panel connectivity. In addition to that, it's just a really nice looking motherboard. It's got a great VRM on it. You could really put an i9 14900K on this if you wanted to, although if you're going to spend that much on the CPU, I would go up a little bit on the motherboard, obviously. Front panel USB Type-C, just really all the features you kind of need on a motherboard like this. Tons and tons of M.2s on it. If you can find this board, this is my top choice. Going up in price, and I'm not sure how much longer these great Z690 deals are going to last. They will sell out at some point, but like we've got the ASUS ROG Strix Z690-F gaming Wi-Fi. It's Wi-Fi 6E on it. It's got tons of rear panel connectivity to it. It's got upgraded audio on it, tons of M.2s, and it has BIOS flashback, which is super important because all the ASUS boards below the ROG Strix ones don't have it. So don't make a mistake and buy the wrong one. This is a great one to pick up for $199. If you're looking for something more white themed, look at the MSI Force Wi-Fi DDR5 version. All white, got great rear panel connectivity. Very, very similar in terms of its overall feature set to the other boards that we've just looked at. Right now going for $229 over at Newegg, but often goes on sale. And then on the Gigabyte side, I like the Gigabyte Z690 Aero G. Some of the other boards that I had been recommending last year have completely sold through, even on the DDR5 side. So look for this one. This is a more creator-focused board, but it's basically an Aorus Pro with the white skin on it instead. Upgraded audio, upgraded rear panel connectivity. Like this board, $219, again, often goes on sale. If you're looking for upgraded features on the Z790 but don't want to spend a lot, I do like the MSI Pro Z790-A because this one does include upgraded audio. It's got the ALC 4080 audio upgrade on it. It's got good rear panel connectivity, comes with Wi-Fi, a number of M.2s on it, not as many as some of those Z690 boards, but it does have that better memory trace on there, so you can clock up some of that DDR5 to higher speeds on this board. $219 right now over at Newegg. What if you're looking for the best motherboard for i7-14700K or the i9-14900K? Any of the boards we've already talked about would be fine for traditional memory speeds that I would recommend for these boards on DDR5. But if you're somebody who wants to push super fast DDR5 speeds, or you looking to do kind of more overclocking, let's talk about a couple of boards, that Z790s that just came out from the various motherboard manufacturers specifically aimed at 14th gen. Let's start off with Gigabyte's Z790 Aorus Elite X. AX, not the Aorus Elite, the Aorus Elite X. $289. There's also a Wi-Fi 7 version that's identical to this board for $279. I don't know why it's $10 cheaper for the better board. That's the one I would get. Gigabyte is advertising overclocked memory speeds up to 8266. Check the specs, check the QVL list. If you want to overclock memory like that, please know what you're doing. And it's got kind of everything else you'd expect out of these higher end motherboards: upgraded audio, tons of rear panel connectivity. On the MSI, we got the MAG Z790 Tomahawk for about $299. Now this is the Z7 Tomahawk Max Wi-Fi, not the Z790 Tomahawk. Those are going to be different boards. This is advertising memory speeds up to 7800. Still very fast, not quite as fast as the Gigabyte advertises, but quite fast. And it's got all those other upgraded features, including it does have Wi-Fi 7, $299 right now. From ASUS, the one I would focus on is the ASUS TUF Gaming Z790 Pro, not the Plus, but the Pro. Slightly less Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi 6E, maybe that's a big deal to you, maybe it's not. Got a couple less M.2 slots, a slightly cut down audio section, not in terms of the audio codec itself, but in the number of capacitors here. But it does look like a very nice motherboard. $299, a little bit more expensive than the other ones, and again, pushing about $7,800 on the OC is what they're advertising. The one I would recommend that you probably get if you are absolutely have to have an ASUS fanboy kind of board, I do like the ASUS ROG Strix Z790F. Now this board has been out. It's already been out, but it's still a great motherboard. Still going to push those slightly faster memory speeds out there. It's got the really slick looking RGB lighting on it. It's got a fantastic looking audio section. And $340, not terrible in terms of pricing. For those of you looking for both a super fast board and you want that white PCB, let's talk about the Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Pro X. This is the board that you saw on the table next to me. Yeah, it looks phenomenal. It's got amazing RGB and it's white PCB. So it's basically all those great features and that. It is a little bit steeper in price, so it's $389. But honestly, especially given that NZXT's N7 Z790 boards, which I typically recommend for like all white or all black builds, don't have BIOS flashback on them. What were you thinking, NZXT? I can't recommend them, so I might take a look at a board like this. In terms of the best creator motherboard for 14th gen Intel, let's take a look at boards that have Thunderbolt 4 support. So this is Z690, Z790, DDR5 motherboards that have that Thunderbolt 4 port on them. I really like the ASUS ROG Maximus Z690 Hero. It's got Wi-Fi 6E on it. It's got tons of features. It's got a really cool LCD screen. $249 right now over at Newegg. I don't know if that sale price is going to hold. This has been one of the more expensive motherboards out there. The other ones I would take a look at are various versions of ASRock's Z690 and Z790 Tai Chi. I like the Tai Chi Razor Edition, or you can just get the regular Z690 Tai Chi. They both have Thunderbolt 4 on them. Or of course, we've got the newer Tai Chi Lite Z790, another really, really good board. You can also look at the older MSI Mag Z690 Ace, tons of M.2 connectivity, including that Thunderbolt 4 port. Right now, it's going for a pretty insane $319 after rebate. Let's ship in the best budget motherboard for Intel 12th and 13th gen locked CPUs, even the i5-12600K or i7-12700K out there. And if you're looking for 12th gen, I do like the MSI Pro B660M-A Wi-Fi. Now this is 12th gen only because it doesn't have BIOS flashback on it, so it won't probably have a BIOS for 13th gen on it, but it's got a good rear panel connectivity. It was tested to run with even an i7-12700F on it, so 2 thumbs up there. $129, I do like this board. Moving on to boards that would be appropriate even for 13th gen locked parts like the 13400. I like the Gigabyte B760M Gaming X. There's also the B660 AORUS Elite board. They're relatively similar. The AORUS Elite has a couple more rear panel connectivity features to it, but both have BIOS flashback on it, so 2 thumbs up there. Come with Wi-Fi on them. These are great motherboards for about $140. Often though, you can find these as low as about $100 on flash sales. Another good board out there is the ASRock B760-Pro RS. These are all DDR4 motherboards because DDR4 is what you're doing if you're building a budget gaming PC. This is a great one, especially if you're looking for an ATX size motherboard. Pretty good rear panel on it as well. My top pick right now, if you're looking for upgraded features and you want to spend just a little bit more, ASUS ROG Strix B760-A Gaming Wi-Fi. This is a DDR4 board, but it's got upgraded ALC 1220 audio on it. It's got a number of M.2 connectivity to it. It's got pretty good rear panel connectivity. Overall, I like this motherboard quite a bit. This motherboard, when it was originally introduced, cost $230, which was stupid at the time. But now that it's come down to a safe and sane $159, I absolutely love it, particularly given all the upgraded features. And honestly, it's only like 30 bucks more than those other kind of more budget entry boards. If you are looking for a Z series motherboard, you have an i5 12600K, the good news is you can find a lot of the cheaper Z690 boards out there that are DDR4, because right now everyone wants overclockable boards that have DDR5 on them because the memory prices have changed. You can find a lot of these boards out there that make a great system with like an i5 12600K, even an i13 600K if you find that on a good sale as well. Stuff like the ASRock Z690 PG Riptide. It also has BIOS flashback on it, which is really nice if you're going to go 13th gen instead of 12th gen. And it's got pretty good rear panel connectivity to it, pretty decent VRM on it. Not a bad board for $124. Let's jump into the best ultra budget motherboards. So these are for the i3 CPUs. You don't need much to run those i3 CPUs, but we are looking for something with a VRM heatsink. Note, if you're looking for one for the 13100F, you'll either need a B760 motherboard or a B660 with BIOS flashback on it. Here's a board that's really only appropriate for the i3 12100F, but has been a great value. Right now, $116. Typically though, sells for about $95. It completely sold out during Prime Day. I'm sure it'll come back in stock at that price. The ASRock B660M Pro RS, great rear panel connectivity, has great heat sinks on it, and they fixed some of the initial problems of this board had running higher core count CPUs. I would put an i5 12400 on this, no problem. Here's a great board, Gigabyte B760M, or if you can find the B660, same thing, because these boards have BIOS flashback. Gigabyte has BIOS flashback on all of their B series motherboards. 2 thumbs up there, unlike MSI, ASUS, and a lot of the ASRock boards. So this is a really good board, pretty good VRM heatsink on it. You really don't want to go up to anything like a 12600K. i5 12400 would probably be fine on, but really, really good value at $109. There's Wi-Fi versions of this board, and there's also a version called the B760MC with a little different looking heatsink. They all sell for about anywhere from $100 to about $120. ASRock B760 MPG Lightning. There's a number of these ASRock boards that are kind of weirdly named. They're absolutely fine, especially if they're the 700 series motherboard like the B760M. $109 right now. This has a great heat sinks on it. I really like it. Decent-ish VRM on it. You could probably put a 12600K on it. I would probably only go up to a 12400 or 13400 on it. It really does the job, and it doesn't cost much at $109. Remember, if you got value out of the video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, especially this guy right here. And of course, subscribe. Click that bell icon, that way you get notified when we release cool content. Remember, check out those links down in the video description. Everything is there. Check out pricing and availability in your region, and we'll catch you on the next one.